project. So, you know, I kind of broke it down in like sort of like three sort of like parts. You know, what happened, and you know, the troubles of making synthesis on a mobile device, and then exploring like what I was thinking when I was making patches. So I've sold over 50 copies. It's amazing. So yeah, I'm in single digits. It'd be nice to be in triple, but long story. So a little bit of a journey. This kind of started at the end of 2014. So that happened. So you may have been around, and that is the space drum app that I put out. So the idea was, I looked at drum machines. I thought, drum machines are complex. Like, you don't know where to start pushing, like to actually make sound. You can push basically anything on this and get sound. It doesn't matter. It's basically two drum machines in one. There's sound samples on the left, and then there's drum samples on the right. And then you push, and it doesn't matter, and it makes music. You can't go out of key. There's no wrong notes, and you just kind of like bash it. We even did a trailer video, of which, can I embarrass you, Ryan?
Sure.
Sure.
What club was this?
It was a co-working space.
Oh.
So good. So yay. Thanks, Ryan. So yeah, that was all well and good, and I was going to update it a while ago, and I can't update it anymore because the library that it runs on top of, the guy stopped making it. And then eventually I couldn't compile it for the new version of iPads that were 64-bit, and so eventually it just fell out of the App Store. I'm like, well, that sucks, all that work. But like, kind of thinking about like, this is where it started, like a sketch of like, hey, like how big should I make it? And usually I start with like an 8x11 piece of paper, and I literally draw out the physical thing that I want to do. And then just go and kind of tap the paper until I like what I see. So I design on paper first, because I want to design for humans in a physical world. Analog. And then this was the first prototype, stupid drum tube. So those buttons are just, I was just seeing whether or not I could even compile an app and get it onto a device. At that time it was like a small iPad, and it's just like, you know, as a software developer, you do these small tiny increments. You see, like, I want to do this next thing, so can I do it? Like, let me look at some articles, let me write some code, deploy, hey, look at that, it works. So over Thanksgiving, like, I took a drawing, put it into Illustrator, and then put it onto the iPad. And I was kind of like, is this the right size I want for my fingers? Because you never really know. Like, you went from the sketch to Illustrator and actually down to a device. And then just coloring that in, it starts to look a little bit better. I'm like, yeah, that's pretty cool. And then when you start fleshing out the details, it's like, hey, this thing is actually working. So this is actual functional working stuff. But then it went through many, many iterations and eventually ended up as this. So what I tried to do was I tried to make it fun and interesting and colorful so that it's not like a drum machine where you pick it up and everything's like the same color or the buttons like are all the same size. I want it to be, you could just pick it up and do something with it, right? Like the thing is that you're not an expert and you shouldn't have to be. So like if I make it look like a piano, people go like, I don't know how to play piano. If I make it look like a guitar, they're like, well, I don't know how to do a guitar. So if I make it look like none of those, there are no expectations.
I like how it looks like a spaceship dashboard. Like
Exactly.
It takes you on a journey.
Exactly. And that's the thing is like, you know, as a person coming from like user experience, it's like, you know, for us, using a mobile phone is not a big deal. I mean, almost all of us probably use a smartphone now, right? And like, you're just like, oh yeah, well you click it and you swipe it up and then like these magic menus and like left and right dudes. That is not intuitive for somebody who's never seen this. They have no expectations of what it is. If you say a phone and you give them a brick, they're like, what? Like, where, how, do you talk into the bottom? Do you, like, and so, but if I gave them a phone that looked like a rotary phone or something like that, they would know which end to hold the receiver. right? There's some natural things. And so like, if you want to break people's expectations, give them something weird. And then they'll have to explore. And the thing is that as they're exploring, you want to make it so it's not super painful, that they can actually just do something and then magic can happen. So anyways, one of the problems why I didn't want to continue the project is because samples suck. If anybody's tried to release a song that uses even one sample, it sucks because the music industry wants their IP and they have ways of stopping you. And so I went down the rabbit hole of trying to figure out, okay, I recorded my husband's drum set. So you can't tell me that the drum samples are like copyrighted because I literally recorded them and I have proof of that. And then I went and asked my friend to go record his grand piano. So you can't tell me I didn't get proof of that. In fact, I have his agreements. That, and I went and I found like an open source like orchestral library. The problem is that like it's varying quality. Like some of those samples are amazing, and some of them are just like, eh. So depending upon what you want, like you're mixing, matching between things that are in tune and out of tune, different recording techniques. It's like, it's great if you're just doing like sort of sequenced audio music and you just want to surprise somebody, but I want sounds that kind of sound like they're part of the package. So I felt it was complicated. So I started looking at synthesis, and I've always had a soft spot for synthesis. So DX7, this is one of the first synthesizers I used, right? Yeah, and it sounds amazing.
Analog.
But have you ever tried to program one? I would like you, like, these are the many ways that you can set the oscillators. It is so powerful, you can simulate almost any sound. The problem is programming the damn thing. I don't know how to do it well. I could get bells and basses and that was about it, right? And I want something that's more versatile. And so like, you look at even something as beloved as this, right? And you look at like how the guts of it are put together, and if you have to like start tweaking things, and they actually did a pretty good job of simplifying stuff. But like when you start trying to actually figure out like how to piece things together, and if you want people to like reroute things, like it gets messy beyond belief. Even this thing, T303, do you care? Really? Ask yourself, do you care? You are a musician, you want to pick up something interesting, you want to do something even more creative with it, right? You want a tool that can actually expand the way you think about music delivery. You don't want to be like, what is connecting to what? Like it doesn't, like I want to make it simple. There are those times when you can make it complex, but for many people, I want to break some expectations and make it easy out of the box. Because even my niece, she's like 13 years old, she downloaded this, she's like, yeah, it sounds pretty good. She plays piano, so she has a slight advantage. But like, even then, like she doesn't want to spend all the time messing with this. Like some people go like, oh, chords, I got plugs. And just like, I don't know about you, but like, it's really hard for me to get into modular synths because I'm like, well, I need an arpeggiator to something else, and like this other thing that shapes this thing, and there's like a granular synth, and just you're plugging all the time. By the time you get something interesting, you can't really save the patch. You kind of look at it and you go, like, okay, that's like that, now that. Then you change the sound around, and then now you've lost what you just did. I don't know, so you end up just buying a crap ton of stuff, and I guess it makes people
weird. It's like freestyle rap, you know?
Yeah, a little bit.
It's a trip.
Yeah.
Because I used to do that on Sayers in the 80s. That's how I learned.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See? So, I mean, like, there are times when you definitely want to play, but like, you know, I want you to be able to focus on music, and like, not every instrument is meant to do that, right? But I want to be simple like this. Like, there aren't too many things you can do at piano, right? You can play it, you can open the lid, you can close the lid, maybe you can put some funky like metal balls on the inside of the piano so they bounce around when you hit. You can change the timbre, you can do stuff, but really you're focused on your composition, your technique, and the parts of the songs that make it interesting, right? Like melodies, rhythm, other kinds of stuff. You're not so much focused on the timbre bit. Like a piano is just, it sounds like a piano. So, you know, you focus on, you know, ideas, like the rhythm of this, or like the flow of the melody. That's what you begin to focus on. The other thing is like, I don't want to do just pure knob twiddling. So recently, I went to the DNA Lounge this past weekend, and the headlining act on Saturday was Danger. Now I haven't really heard that much of danger, but basically, electronic musician, beeps and bloops and like big thick bass and like kind of like over compressed everything. I mean, it's great for club music, but like he was doing this and like sliding. And my friend who actually runs audio in the DNA Lounge, he took a video of it and he's just like, look, the audio interface isn't even connected to the mixer. The guy is literally doing the mixer for show.
Oh, he's lip syncing.
He was lip syncing. Doing that kinds of crap. And I guess like there's so much that you would do sort of in the studio. Like when you're up there, it would be stupid just to stand there. Like you're giving energy to the crowd. The energy is coming back. So is it a performance? Is it a real performance? Are people enjoying themselves? Yes, they are. But like I want personally something a little more authentic than not twiddle. So, anyways, I think that part of this, what I'm trying to say is that you have an instrument, a single instrument that gives you some amount of restrictions, and by putting those restrictions on you, it allows you to free up your mind to do other things and thinking about the melodies and not so much about how are things wired together. So like the DX7 example, where you can take all the oscillators and stuff and you can like jam them together, you could get lost in that very quickly. And so I want to give you some freedom, but a lot more restrictions, so you're forced to think about other things. Just because you have lines that you have to color inside, that does not mean that you have to follow the rules. There still are no rules, but you're more or less in a kind of a lane. Does that make sense? It's just like some people, you lock yourself into like a 5/4 beat. That sets the lines. What you do inside 5/4 is up to you, and you can still be creative. You can still break the rules. You throw in a 4/4 measure for good, just to bring people in, and then go back to like weird 5/4 time. You can do those things. You set expectations, you break them a little, but then there's some structure. And I guess that's what I'm trying to come back to is structure. So speaking of that, this is trackers, right? So I did not start personally with Pro Tracker, but a lot of people have started kind of a Pro Tracker. I started more with the Impulse Tracker up there. I know it's kind of low resolution up here, but you can see it looks more like this, kind of a grid. Other people prefer more like this. I don't remember which one this is. This might be Fast Tracker. Kind of hard to tell. For a while I was using something a little bit closer to this, which I think is the Windows version. But anyways, the whole point is that you're mostly dealing with samples. Like these days I use Renoise, and it's just my go-to if I want to do samples. And if I'm actually going to release music through that fluid music route, chances are I'm probably going to do something sample-based, mostly because I'm going to take somebody else's track, chop it up, and then like export music out of it. I might layer on some synths, but that's a different story.
So do you ever use the C64?
Have I used the C64? Not for music. But yeah, I mean, like I've played with the C64. I've seen somebody turn a C64 into a bass guitar too. But okay. I mean, the SID music chip. I mean, that's a great start. Like my first exposure to music was probably like an Apple II computer, right? So like it only makes one sound, but even then, that one chip, like you can do crazy things. There is a tracker that does digital synthesis on an Apple II, then they sell it on a floppy disk right now. Like if you can find Apple II, you can download the software, and I forget what it's called. I just watched it on YouTube. It was amazing. Like you can still, with that small box, with that very underpowered thing, you can still get digital synthesis in year 2019, which is like mind-blowing. So restrictions, you can still do a lot. And like you have some like plug-in choices, you have like effects and stuff like that. And I didn't want people to get lost in effects when I'm building this synthesizer here. So I want you to focus. So the interface itself is pretty Spartan. Some people have written on the reviews, they're just like, oh, it looks like Tron. It's like whatever. Well, it's like Star Trek UI. It's like, oh, you think you're so edgy. I'm like, no, have you tried to play in the dark for like an extended period of like over an hour? Like, you don't really want big bright blobs in your eyes. Like you want just something that tells you where things are. So the interface actually doesn't change that much. As you can see here, like even if I go into instrument mode, I don't know if you can see it there. Like it's pretty like high contrast and the colors are generally pretty dark. So when you touch the keys, those are the things that light up. So you can tell what you're pressing. So if your attention's over here, but you put your hand off to the side and you're touching this, you can still see what you're doing. That was the whole point of doing that. So even like the sliders, like there's these big like white bars up there. Like you see the white bar, but I'm hoping that you're not overwhelmed by everything else. I mean, I don't know. I've been playing with it for 1.5 years, so it works for me. That's what I can say. Oh, come see me in October. I'm going to be at the Hacker Dojo for like 2 days doing stuff. Yeah, PSA, side note. I know. Anyways, so this is what's on the inside of this machine. You have one noise generator, you have like 7 different envelopes, 3 oscillators, program settings, and a feedback loop. This is per voice, and you have 16 of them. Can you do more? Yes. In fact, like all of this stuff is just software, right? So I can chain, the original version of this had 6 oscillators, right? And it had like 3 envelopes per oscillator. So that's a lot of stuff. And it's not that the computer couldn't handle it, it's just that I couldn't build a user interface that I was really happy with. Like it was so complex and way too much freedom, right? So I was getting this feeling, I was like, shoot, like too much stuff, like it's a rat's nest. So this is what I did. I paired it up. So each of the 3 oscillators has specific envelopes, and you can't change them. You can't even route the oscillator 1 to FM modulate oscillator 2. Even though in the software technically you can. Everything can modulate anything else, but that's too much. So for this synthesizer, it's really simple. Well, it's more simple, well, I don't know. Everything can be complicated, but I think it's simple. So 3 oscillators is what you get, no more. I actually did do a comp. So there's an entire like patch bay routing system that I've prototyped. And I actually built most of it, and I played around with it and went, holy crap, this is like really hard. Like, how can you tell what these lines do? You can't. And so this is one of those things where I try to I do something, and I'm like, it's too complex, let me work the user experience a little bit, right? So like, you have an idea, you put it into code, you test it out, it's like, that prototype is bad, and you keep moving on. It's one of the reasons why I didn't ship the combination mode in this, because I started going down that road, and I'm like, this is so complex, I can't make a good UI that makes sense when you're using fingers. Because remember, the same thing runs on your phone. How can I do this? So the restriction is I must be able to do this on my phone. If I can't do it on my phone, I don't even want to try it, because everybody builds an iPad app, but I'm pretty much one of the few apps that actually runs both on the iPad and on the iPhone, and it's the same app, and you can send data back and forth. Same sounds, same engine. It's just a different size. Like, so this one, you can't see the graph that you can see here, because I didn't feel there was any room, but you can hide keys, you can still get to the same thing. So this is like mobile responsive. If you're in web design, the idea is that like the main website and the mobile site, they contain exactly the same information, so that like you're like out and about, you're on your mobile phone, you're just like, shoot, I have to go and like submit a bank payment, but there's no button because they made a special mobile version. So, but you can always like escape out to desktop mode, but then sometimes that's a completely different app. In this case, this is mobile responsive. It literally just responds to the size of the device, and that's it. So, as a software developer, as a UX designer, features versus simplicity. There's always that balance. And there's no good particular formula that I've found. So, yeah, lots of stuff to come up. Well, let me talk about the engine. So this is how I first did the engine. So I sat down with paper, and I always start with paper because it's a lot easier to think about.
Analog.
Analog, you go analog. And I suck at math, and so you can see here, slope equals upper minus lower, center minus position. And I'm like, what? I'm figuring out ADSR crap. I'm figuring out delays and increments and trying, like I literally plugged that into my calculator. I'm like, what does this mean? Okay, it's a floating point number. Okay, I can work with that. That turned into this. This is one of the first prototypes, right? So like you get in there and you're just like, oh, that's kind of cool. Like rotating knobs and stuff like that. And it turned into something like this. Will this play? Yeah, this will play. But you can see here, oh, well you could see, right? 6 oscillators. each of them goes into this, and I was like, well, then how do you know what you're doing? Like, I figured if you tap on oscillator 1, then these things like slide up, and then that tells you what the amp is, and then if you hit the oscillator settings, and then kind of change, and the labels change, and like, the whole thing about object permanence is that it's like, the way the system works now is much more like everything is on sheets, and then tapping through the top kind of moves you through sheets, so you can kind of think of like, everything is kind of next to each other. Or like if you go to like demo mode, it's physically over there, instrument mode's physically over here, right? So the idea is that there's the sense that there's like infinite sheets and they're just kind of sliding around, versus this, where everything is virtual. You click it and there's no sense of place. You literally have to reread these or interface and figure out like, what do these things do, because they literally change function. So I have this big thing, like if you go into an airplane cockpit, at least an old school one, not the new digital ones, the dials always are in the same positions because you can't change metal. Like it does a specific thing. So you know over here, there's one dial that does this thing, this one's the altimeter, this one's like airspeed, and stuff like that. Like they're all in special places so that if you need to glance, you can build muscle memory and go, yeah, that. You can reach over here and know that that lever's there. So I kind of wanted to do the same kind of thing with this, where you generally know where things are, and you get the sense of like tapping back and forth. So that was just one of those things that just happened. What's going on? Click to exit full screen. Right. Whatever. So this is the journey that happened, from the idea through the iteration to the app. And the whole thing is that the internal name for this is the SAW synthesizer, because it started out as just being SAW waves. And the problem is that SAW waves are great. If you remember, like Nintendo Entertainment System, like this is kind of one of the inspirations. I'm like, hey, this would have a really distinctive sound, but and that's great. And then if you take triangle waves and you pitch them, or you kind of like sway them, then you end up getting saws, right? So basically, what this does is it takes this and then it skews it so you can get that. But it can also skew it the other way so you can get so this is more of a round, the other way is a saw. But there's a problem, because triangle waves and sawtooths, they have so many like harmonics built into them, you can't erase those. So I'd have to actually throw in filters to cut it out. And what I wanted to get was kick drums. So the thing about that is nice, even waves. So that way it has much more of a center like tone, a big fat round tone. So there's two ways to think about synthesis, in my opinion. Like, I don't know, you might have more opinions, Rob, but I think of that, you have additive synthesis, where you have little pieces and you just kind of stack them together until you get sort of a sonic timbre. Otherwise, the rest of the world, in my opinion, kind of does subtractive. Basically, you have a bass tone generator, be it a wavetable or some sort of an oscillator, and then you layer on effects and chorus, and like you do delays and like stereo expansion, and then use filters to whack out parts of the frequency spectrum. I'm not saying that's not good, I'm just saying that that is a kind of synthesizer. So I liken it as literally like ice carving, right? Like you have a thing that is just this massive block of sound, and then you just kind of chip away and be like, I just want the highs. There you go, filter out the highs. And I just want highs in this one part, and I want it to sweep over time, so you just keep chipping away at it, and you automate the stuff. So there's not a right or a wrong, it's just different. So this synthesizer does additive, or at least closer to additive. I figure, why cut anything out and spend the CPU to cut it out when you can just never put it in the first place? If you don't want a horn on the top of your unicorn, then just don't build it with a horn. Why not? So you either can take your sound and strain it, or you can just build it up. So how do you go from triangles to sine waves? Turns out it's really easy. You throw it through a cosine. As long as you map it properly, you take a triangle and you map it between 0 to 1. The 0 is at the bottom, 1 is at the top. But then instead of that, you kind of multiply it so that it becomes 0 to pi. And then you throw it through a cosine. Well, what do you get? You get perfect sine waves. So it is a saw to start as an oscillator, but because it runs through the cosine, or actually sine is kind of the same thing, but because it runs through that, it ends up flipping the wave upside down sometimes. So somebody actually wrote, it's like, the developer doesn't even know the difference between ramp and saw, because the waves are upside down. I'm just like, it doesn't matter. Like, they sound the same, but internally, it does matter when you're first building it out, because the way the slope is, if you have, say, increasing volumes, then it would definitely matter. But at least in sound generation, the way this is built, it doesn't matter so much. So literally, there's a slider that will take it and it will bend it from either this to this to this. So that is the saw, middle, and then the ramp version. And that maps to either more of a saw, more of a sine, or more of a ramp. It's a little funky, but it actually works. So you take that and then you shape it with an ADSR, and then you can do stuff like this. So this wave, if you want something like this, here's my version of it, or at least one of them. Yeah, see, look, nice smooth waves. Yeah. They have low character and they're nice and smooth. Let's talk about patches.
And so how did you go from triangle to sine again, or cosine to automatic? So what did you patch, or what did you?
Mm-hmm. So it's just mapping values, right? So if you have, this is a triangle wave, right? At the bottom, let's say that is 0.
Mm-hmm.
This is 0.5 halfway up. This is 1 at the top. So all you do is you just map it, you just multiply that. And you get out, oh, sorry, let me go down here. You multiply it times pi. So 0 times pi is 0. 1 times pi is pi. You just basically just increase it. That's all. You just turn it up by 3.14.
But then and then this would just change the amplitude of the triangle.
It does.
But that really would not change. How do you change the?
Because of this. Taking that value and throwing it into a trig function like cosine.
Oh, you calculate some. Oh, you just.
Yes, cosine of 0 is 1. Cosine of pi is like -1.
I thought you were bad at math and confused.
No, I am bad at math. I'm just good at like just messing around until I get the values I want. So you can see that that's part of the problem where it flips.
So basically, then you use the sine wave to that. You put so you go just try to understand. So
Yes.
you do this is your basically base of it. Then you
Yes.
go to this transformation.
Yeah, and this is
then
the output.
This is the output.
Yeah.
And then if you have, but you have to do the cut. Okay.
Yeah, you have to do a multiplication. Otherwise, what would happen is 0 to 1. If you were to trace along this curve, it would go from 1 to like about here. So it would still kind of work, but you wouldn't get the full sweep all the way to the bottom. So you'd end up with this weird curve if you were to draw it. But if you were just bouncing like this between 0 and pi, 0 and 1 and 0 and 1, you would get basically, whoa, what happened to my thing? You would get this weird kind of like hump curve out of it that had a very sharp corner at the bottom. By being able to draw, by multiplying it all the way to pi, what happens is then over time, basically it makes a complete sine wave.
What does the multiplication use, a gate or something?
What?
What does the multiplication use, a gate or something?
No, multiplication is literally just multiplying the value by pi. So
So you hand figure out the values and then rebuild the wave?
So this is time going from left to right. At the beginning of time, there's the value 0, and then over time it increases all the way to 1, then it starts going back all the way to 0. So it creates this like this. But what I want is I want to smooth up and down, and that is the trick. So it's literally just 0 to 1, multiply it up, and you get that. Well, after you throw through that.
So why don't you start with the sine wave?
I'm sorry?
So why don't you start them with the cosine and sine wave and just shift the phase around?
Sure, I could. So literally so Louis Dornfeld, he was like, well, what you built was basically a phase distortion synthesizer. Because what you did was you said that you'll go over time, you'll make values go from 0 to 1, and then from 1 to 0. In this case, it's a very regular pattern, right? So now imagine instead, if I back up to this, over time, let's say I go from, imagine this is 0, but let's say I go all the way from 0 to 1, and then go very, very quickly back from 1 to 0. Just imagine I did that. What is the net effect? Even if you throw this through a cosine, it will actually end up looking a lot like this. Because what you'll do is then, if you look at the wave over here, you'll begin to draw this very slowly. So it'll basically go down very slowly. Then at the end, it'll snap back. So it'll be like a ramp, boom, like that. Does that make sense? So I can see why somebody said, yeah, you just made it, the developer made it go backwards. Like, fine, I can like take that and I can shift it by some number, and then you actually start from 0 and go to 1. It's like, to your ears, you won't even notice the difference. It's only if you use this to modulate something else that you'd notice the difference. Enough math? So it's so much stuff, like it's just, playing around with stuff. So what I wanted to do was kind of go through some of the patches and just show you what's going on here. So the patch that kind of started out was this one, So pretty basic synthesizer, sounds a little metallic, a little bit harsh in it. When I pick up a synthesizer, I always like to get sort of like the first bank as being just like this grab bag of stuff, right? So just fun to say, what can you do with this thing? Because somebody's probably going to do this, and then just hit next. I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. So the way it's organized is bank 0 of the factory bench patches. It does weird stuff. Everything from bass to bells to plucks to leads to organs. Like, here's the... Anyways, there's that. And then it goes into synthesizer type sounds. So you're more of like all your...
So,
Yes.
So if you start with the sound like Van Halen, right? So if you think about, so in your terms, or you were thinking, so now you have this sound, right? So you say, oh, I want to have it less harsh. So how would you use your engine to do that?
Sure. I'll go into this real quick. So you can see that this one is used on the generator 1. I have a gain of 1 and an output level of 1. So it's gain and output level over there. Oscillator 2, gain, output levels, pretty normal. The final one is gain and output level, and you can see that it's a tenth over there. So it's not very high, right? It's just, it's like that much. So if you check the tuning, the first one is 2 octaves up. The second one is slightly detuned, or slightly sharp. So if you turn that down, you can hear that. If you put it back, it gives you a little bit of movement in there. And the last one is 18.96. So it is almost but not quite an octave up and a seventh up. So that gives you a very slight detuning on the 7th. So without, then increase. So I always feel like that giving just a little bit gives you a little extra depth. So let me turn that down. So now we're just dealing with 2 octaves up. You can see it's full saw. So if I just tune this down. That's making pretty much a pure sine wave right there. So the first thing is, how much of a saw do I want? The second thing is, like, do I want it to start sharp and then kind of like taper off and hold at sustain of 90? So that's pretty much it. It starts as a saw and it stays as a saw. I can make it start as a saw and then kind of dip down to more of a, I don't know, like hump, I guess. So there's different options. If I take it and do like this. So now I'll take 436 milliseconds to go from a pure sine wave to more of a song. Take it 3.6 seconds. Yeah, so that's how you make it sort of like sharper or whatnot. Reset that. Oh, that's way too short. Let's do this. Yep, and then it's just all about, you know, doubling things up and then adding a little extra depth. So yeah, I mean, here's a package like synthesizer sounds. There's a lead, bells. The ones that are not grouped together, like this bell is kind of sitting in the middle of like brass and synthesizer. It's basically a filler. Like I didn't know what to put in order to make everything line up so that you have like 8 synthesizers and then 8 brass instruments. Because honestly, you didn't need that many. So each of them is supposed to have a little bit of different character. And one of the things I wanted to do when making the synthesizer is not just to have the usual synthesizer stuff, but also have stuff that felt a little more organic. And I felt that was something I haven't seen a lot of. Also because it can do pure sine waves, you can actually get quite a variety of percussion instruments out of it. Snares. Oh, that's obviously that's not a snare, but. Good to have cowbells. You know, and like you more percussive stuff. And there's no samples, this is pure synthesis. And then there's some other just basic stuff. And then some just weird stuff.
Analog.
So, yeah, I don't know, I've been generally pretty happy with it. So the reason why it's taken about 1.5 years to do the patch is because I would play a gig, then I would build more patches, then play another gig, then keep tuning them until I liked what I heard. And so the only thing that's a little different than when I actually do a gig is I might change some of the volumes of things, but other than that, like, these things are organized so that if I'm playing, you know, like a bass instrument, that I can just jump up and then I can get some keyboard sounds. Most of them are like, I don't know, I put a bunch in Bank 0. But they also are supposed to sound like different and interesting. And they're also velocity sensitive. So they change their timbres based upon like where you hit on the keyboard. So, yeah. So there's a lot of variety. And if you're playing with a MIDI keyboard, then you get tons and tons of expression, which is also cool. Another interesting thing I wanted to add, where's the drag up and down? Yeah. You can move up and down and get aftertouch, and it sends as aftertouch signals. And so basically that is basically moving this modulation, but it's really moving this one.
Sounds like a
Per
pitch
instrument.
bend.
Sorry?
Sounds like a pitch bend.
It's like a pitch bend, except it's more like. It's more like a filter. Yeah. I mean, you could do the global thing where that if you're on the demo, like. But it's not a filter. That's the thing. There are no filters in this, unless you count feedback as a filter, which is arguably a filter. But what's different about this is that, remember the model of like Legos versus chipping away at ice blocks? It's kind of that thing. Like, what the modulation is doing is, it's either allowing more or less of the saw skewing to happen. So at full modulation, you're getting all the timbres that you want. That's actually just closer to just pure sine waves, which is kind of hilarious because it sounds like that drum is just like running out of breath, and just like it's poor wheezing. So what you may think like, oh, like, well, what are these demo songs too? It's like, so I wanted something where if somebody picked this up, one, it will look kind of fun, right? I mean, who doesn't like a rainbow in front of them? Second of all, like, it shouldn't, like, you shouldn't have to like fight with this thing. It should be just like, oh, this big play button.
So it has a sequencer built in too?
Yeah, I haven't shown the UI of it. Like, you can't get to this because I haven't figured out how to build a good track yet. But I still wanted a demo song. For the other reason that it's hard to tell what you can and can't do with something like this. It's really hard to say like, well, okay, fine, yes, you have all these like programs you can use, but like, yeah, and it sounds kind of cheap, and you don't have any reverb effects, and it's like, yeah, but when you listen to it in the mix, like, do you miss the reverb? Like, I don't know, maybe. What I figured is you would use this instrument and then put it in the chain of other instruments. So I'm not gonna tell you what your favorite reverb is. It's like, no, this is just gonna be an audio unit, and you just plug it into anything else. I mean, do you blame Massive, like, for that it can't do something? It's like, no, you just take it and just plug it into something else. It's like this is one tool. It's not meant to be your entire workstation, but you know, it has its own character. The other interesting thing about this is that these demo songs actually help me tune the instruments. So I didn't know how I wanted like the bass to go, and I was trying to get kind of close with like this one. And the one of these had. So portamentos and stuff like that, and just like trying to get like how do I want to sound, and so it's kind of like the demo songs and the tracker built into it help educate the rest of the stuff, and then it's just like, then I try to play around and see can I actually use it in performance. Yeah. What other questions otherwise? Taking a little bit longer than I thought it would.
That's kind of a big question, but
Yeah.
when you're doing like synthesis with a couple of different oscillators,
Mhm.
how do you think about like how different shapes blend together? Like a sine wave and something that's closer to the saw or the ramp side and in between?
Well, I mean, a sine wave doesn't have much character, right? And a saw wave has tons of character, and a square wave has tons of character. I mean, it depends what you want. I think of that, I don't think of it in the math sense, I kind of put that side of my brain away. I think of it as like, a saw wave is good when you just, a sine wave is when you just want someone to hear or feel something. So like good bass instruments, right? Sine waves are great. You don't need a lot of character with them. Saw is when you want to get noticed. That's when it's really sharp and harsh, and you just want to stab people's ears, right? That's what we want to do, right? Like, I think it's, I don't know where it is in this one, but like, yeah, you can kind of hear that, but like, it has a little bit of harshness in it. And I think of like square waves as when you want to be, I don't know, more metallic. I think it's just the way the partials overlap. It's just, it sounds a lot more metallic.
Square waves have a lot of harmonics, but
They do.
I think more than saw.
Yeah. I read somewhere that like the difference between like a square wave and a sawtooth is just the odd or the even like overtones that you add to it. So if you look at the overtone series and just add all the odd ones, I think you get like a sawtooth or something like that. And if you do all the even ones, you get the square wave. It's really weird math. It's just one or the other, you get. So it's like you're triggering two different types of things. It just depends on what you like to hear.
When you